Hello, everybody. I invite you to take your hands, hold them up like this, let them be loose and relaxed. Now grip them as tight as you can. I want you to squeeze. I want you to make a fist. And I want you to notice the strength and the energy required to hold on to clutch, to keep this tight grip. Now I want you to take a deep breath and kind of loosen and relax your hands. That is the posture of somebody who's living in the reality of the kingdom of God, who is living the generous life, loose, relaxed hands. 4 stories. The first one, a man by the name of Ronald Reed, who was born into a house that was very impoverished. He had to walk 2 miles to school, 2 miles home from school, and yet he was the first one to graduate from high school from his family. He was so proud. He went into the military and served his country. When he got out, he took up a job at a service station, a full service gas station, where he worked for 25 years. Some of you have never heard or been to such an animal. And then he retired from that and went on to work at a hospital for a couple of decades as a janitor. Now, he never married early in his life. It was late in life, so he did not have his own biological children. He had some children he claimed that his own from his previous wife. They would call his step or his bonus kids. He spent a lot of his time after he got married going down to that same local hospital to read books in their library and visit with folks. And they learned of his love for reading. They sent him to go check out the public libraries where he could read other books. Now, he and his wife had simply bought a $12,000 very modest home. And when he died, as he did recently, he gave that home to his wife. He took care of his bonus children in his will. And then to that little hospital where he read books and had coffee, he gave $4.8 million. And to that little library, he gave $1.2 million. And they had a budget of less than $600,000. And people ask, how did he do it? Well, here's how. He lived off the 10-20-80 principle from very early in his life. That is, you give 10% to your church, you save 10% and invest it, and then you live off the other 80. And he quickly moved to 20, 30, 50. That is, he gave 20% to his church. He invested wisely to 30 and lived off the 50. Now, what was it? How did he live such a simple Spartan lifestyle? Nobody made him and nobody forced him. Down deep within himself, he wanted to live in the reality of the kingdom of God, and he wanted to live the generous life. Another man, born into wealth and privilege. Everything that money could buy, he had it. Even bought him a Harvard education. He gets out of Harvard, he amasses his own fortune, but he loses it all. And he dies a penniless man. He had a meaningless life. He died lonely with nothing ever really of meaning and purpose to give himself to. This takes us to the third story, the story of a man named Jesus, who was the most expert on money of any human being that's ever walked on the face of this earth. 19 of the parables that Jesus told, like the lost coin, like of the 2 debtors, of the rich young fool, of the man who owned the vineyard and the laborers in the vineyard, were about socio-economic situations. Thousands of verses in the Bible are all about money and generosity. In the Gospels, every 19th verse is somehow on average about money and generosity. In the Gospel of Luke, it is every 7th verse. Fascinating. This subject matter is only second in the Bible to idolatry, and yet the Apostle Paul in the book of Colossians says that greed itself is idolatry. A definition for generosity is very, very simple. It is learning to trust in the reality of the kingdom. See, just as money is real, and it is so real, the kingdom is real. And when we give, when we are generous, we are trusting God and we are stepping into a deeper reality. Now, most of the valuable things in this earth and most valuable relationships that we have, they are not sold and they are not monetized. When you go to a nice, expensive restaurant, the items on the menu, there is no price. because there is no price that can be placed, they believe, on the value of that. This idea comes deep within us, that precise reciprocity, that is value for things that are important, and for sure for relationships that matter the most. The talk about price or value only cheapens the relationship. In The Lord of the Rings, when the Fellowship is sent out, Tolkien says they are not to take anything. Tolkien was a follower of Jesus. And certainly he's referring to when Jesus sent out his followers, he said, take nothing with you along the way. You will survive by the gifts of generosity of others. Tolkien in The Lord of the Rings never talks or mentions currency. See, the important things in The Lord of the Rings, they are either given, they are found, or they are stolen. Even the Ring of Power. Every time the Ring of Power exchanged owners, it was either given, it was found, or it was stolen. And it's indisputable. It's really kind of hard to kind of discern, but when you read it now, you really know that the ring, no one ever owned it. The ring always owned, supposedly, whoever owned it. Gandalf feared owning the ring. Even though he wanted to get control of it, he had fear it would gain control of him and would shape him into its own image. You see, not only do you and I own things, things own us. And I want you to pause here just for a second. I want you to think. Reflect upon your own life. Is there anything in your financial life? Maybe the fear of financial insecurity. Maybe the fear of being owned by stuff. Is there anything that really owns you? You think, I have to have it. I have to experience this. Now, I want to take this just a little bit deeper. When you think about our salvation, when you think about our relationship with Jesus, we use terms of currency in the Bible for redemption. The word debt. Jesus took all of the debt of the world upon his shoulder. He died, he sacrificed, laid down his own life for all of the evil on the world. In this case, you would say that God is unfair because God paid a debt that he doesn't owe. He takes the debts of the world upon himself. He is just as unfair as that owner who had the land, who had all the workers in his vineyard, and he paid the one at the end the same amount, the high wages that he paid the one who started at the very beginning of the day. He was unfair. In the ancient world, the word for gospel, euangelion, was also a word that the ancient Greeks used to describe someone who gave someone a tip because they brought them good news. You and I give a tip as an act of gratuity, as an expression of grace to someone who did a good job, who went beyond the call of duty to serve us. When we are generous with our time and our energy, with what we do, particularly with our finances, it is not a sum-zero game, tit for tat, value for value. When we are generous, somehow, in some way, we are stepping into the reality of the kingdom of God. You see, I didn't give myself my body. I didn't give myself my life. They are all gifts. The generosity of God. For God so loved the world that he gave. God is so unfair. And thank God, God is unfair. Thank God, God is generous even when it doesn't make sense to a people who don't value it, who don't appreciate it. We are living in the reality of the kingdom of God, whether you realize it or not. And the basic rule is to love. And the basic way to love is to give, is to be generous. So I want to encourage you, be wise with your money, save and invest. But be generous. Pursue the generous life. You can choose to live your life like this or to live your life like this. Store up for yourselves treasures not down here, but up there. Take the 90-day tithe challenge. and see what God does as you pursue the generous life.